In 1999, Chinese archaeologists unearthed a human skeleton with the right foot missing. A recent medical analysis of the incomplete remains of the female, who was discovered at a site in Shanxi Province, determined that she had been the victim of a cruel form of punishment in ancient China where a criminal's foot was amputated. Was one of the 5 punishments meted out as penalties for the most heinous crimes in China for close to a millennia before the early Imperial period. In today's video, we will be showing you brutal truth about ancient Chinese punishment. Without further ado, let's begin. Punishment. Nearly 3,000 years ago, the foot of a Chinese woman was cut off in an amputation, probably not for a medical condition, but as punishment for committing a criminal act, a new study of her bones suggests. It's one of the few times archaeologists have discovered evidence of an ancient Chinese punishment. Various clues hint that the woman's foot was cut off as Her bones showed no signs of any disease that could have made such an amputation necessary, and it seems the injury was roughly made, rather than with the precision of a medical amputation. The researchers considered other possibilities for how the woman might have lost her foot, such as from an accident, a war injury, or a surgical procedure. Study lead author Lai Nan, an archaeologist at Peking University in China, told Live Science. The punishment was common in ancient China for over 1,000 years, until it was abolished in the 2nd century before Christ. According to a 2019 study in the Tsinghua China law, at the time the woman was living, up to 500 different offenses could result in having a foot amputated, including rebelling, cheating, stealing, and even climbing over certain gates. The 5 punishment for slaves. The journey of mankind has been filled with joy, discovery, and wonder. Unfortunately, it has done so alongside pain, evil, and shame. To begin the Chinese theme, this connection of opposing sides is symbolic of the famous Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, illustrating that conflicting factors are complementary, even dependent on one another. Perhaps the same can be said for crime and punishment, that they are a necessary entity of everyday life. In much of the world today, forms of torture are frowned upon, and even for criminals. Alternative forms are encouraged in most countries. It is an attitude that feels right, to save a population from desensitizing and returning to a barbaric system of justice. It also inhibits the famous eye for an eye principle, which uses a take from me and I take from you legal philosophy. Anything from money, land, or ultimately, an eye. This idiom was first mentioned in the Book of Hammurabi from ancient Mesopotamia, a functioning civilization that harbored torturous punishments also. Much of the world has changed so much since that time, making it hard to imagine that torture was once a mainstay, commonly practiced and accepted form of punishment in every corner of the world, even within governments. One such place was, and is, the great land of China. Cane punishment. Punishment, of course, continued in other forms. Here is an example of torture used even until the 20th century, a technique called a cane board used in many parts of Asia. It was implemented in other parts of the world, also such as England, where it was known as a pillory. The pillory device, however, would be fixed to the ground, while the cane could be moved by the recipient if needed. It obviously restricted movements, even to the point where people could not feed themselves, resulting in starvation in many cases, unless they had friends and family to help them, otherwise strangers. The prisoner would be in the cane for as long as the punishment merited. It was mostly the sentence for thieves. These methods continued until China became a republic in 1912. Then it became westernized, and more socialism brought about changes in punishment techniques, making them less brutal. Although, as shown with the death penalty, the older traditions remain in China, whereas in other countries, the death penalty has been outlawed completely. China, according to Amnesty International, accounts for the majority of capital punishments on Earth. Like many countries, China developed a culture of punishment and torture. However, unlike many countries, such as in Western Europe, have kept aspects of it, such as the death penalty. There are also many reports regarding punishments similar to the 5 going on in secret prisons, known as black prisons. The famous bamboo shoot and water torture are a few of the methods practiced. European installations, like the Council of Europe, make banning capital punishment a mainstay if a country wishes to join. This is to do with the miscarriage of justice which can occur. Lynching. From the Tang dynasty until the final years of the Qing, a form of capital punishment set itself apart from the rest for its particularly cruel and brutal practices. The ancient Chinese torture tactic known as lynching, which translates loosely to slow slicing, lingering death, or death by 1,000 cuts, was used as a method of execution from the 7th century up until 1905, when it was officially outlawed. As the name implies, lynching was a drawn-out and brutal process, wherein an executioner would deliver justice to various lawbreakers by administering a series of cuts to the skin. Unlike most execution styles, which aim to kill sooner rather than later, the aim of lynching was a long, slow punishment, intended to see how many cuts a person could withstand before dying or simply losing consciousness. The procedure was fairly straightforward and called for the condemned person to be tied to a wooden post, unable to move or break free from their binds. From there, the executioner would then administer cuts to bare flesh, usually starting at the chest, where the breast and surrounding muscles were methodically removed until the bare ribs were almost visible. Next, the executioner would make his way over to the arms, cutting away large portions of flesh and exposing tissue in an excruciating bloodbath before moving down to the thighs, where he would repeat the process. Chinese water torture. Human beings have inflicted untold suffering on each other since the dawn of time. Over the centuries, people have worked to devise constantly evolving forms of punishment and coercion. Compared to devices like the Iron Maiden or chains and whips, Chinese water torture may not sound particularly grueling, but history begs to differ. Medieval torture devices typically used razor-sharp blades, ropes, or blunt instruments to pry confessions from subjects. Chinese water torture was more insidious, however. According to the New York Times Magazine, the torture method involves holding a person in place while slowly dripping cold water on their face, forehead, or scalp. The splash of water is jarring, and the victim experiences anxiety while trying to anticipate the next drop. From the Vietnam War to the War on Terror, other methods of enhanced interrogations using water, such as simulated drowning or waterboarding, have largely sidelined general curiosity about Chinese water torture. But while scarce evidence of its actual implementation exists, Chinese water torture has a long and fascinating history. So guys, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. For more interesting content, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more awesome content. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next video.